Well, welcome everyone, one and all, to Impolite Company on the GCPR.live network, the show where we do the thing that you're not supposed to do, talk about religion and politics, only we try to do it in a healthy way. I'm your host, Matthew Best. Together, we walk through honest dialogue, explore messy truths, and try to see the humanity and perspectives different from our own. And if you have a thought or a question, you want to challenge something, you can email me at contactimpolitecompany@gmail.com. And don't forget, you can subscribe to past and future episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. And just search for Impolite Company. And if you want to dive deeper into some of the themes that we explore, you can visit my blog at pastormatthewbest.com. And we always appreciate any type of support. Any financial support goes into just right back into the show. It's you can do that by going to buymeacoffee.com/impolite company. So and then at about halfway through, I'll jump in and share what I usually share about some of the other things I'm passionate about. But today, I want to dive into today's conversation. I have with me one of my colleagues, Amy Kelly, who serves as deacon at House of Prayer Lutheran Church and Van Kirk Lutheran Church, where she is primarily called to focus on children's ministry, stewardship, supporting feeding programs of Healing Hunger Beaver County. Additionally, she leads Spark Inclusion Ministry, chairs the Southwest PA Synod Authentic Diversity and Justice Working Group, serves on the board of the Lutheran Campus Ministry in Greater Pittsburgh, a policy council member for LAMPA, which is the Lutheran Advocacy Ministry in Pennsylvania, woohoo, and is executive director of her local education foundation, which tells me that she does not sleep a lot then, given all the other things that she's busy doing. She graduated from Luther Seminary in December 2024 and was ordained this past March. Before seminary, Amy was primarily a stay-at-home mom, and her first career was in higher education fundraising. Amy is married and the mother of four tween sons, and she occasionally sleeps. Yes, see, we already said that. And yes, she drinks a lot of coffee, which is, of course, a Lutheran sacrament. And so, Amy, thank you so much for taking some time to be with us today on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, I had asked you to come on because you had read or not read. You saw the last episode that I did
Mhm.
where I was talking about women's ordination and women in ministry, and my little part of trying to trying to speak up, and a lot of that came from the comments that I was seeing. It sparked me. The
Mhm.
comments that I was seeing in relation to the new or the elect presiding bishop of the Anglican Communion,
Mhm.
and just seeing like comment after comment after comment after comment, and some of these comments were just downright horrible. That's on the terrible end. To people all of a sudden becoming experts in biblical passages, cherry picking and proof texting and all this other kind of garbage that goes on. And it was, of course, it's like these comments are always men who are doing this, and it got to me. And here I am, like, I don't normally have to deal with this, unlike you and several of my other colleagues. And so I did an episode where I just wanted to at least scratch the surface a little bit. And you had sent me a message afterwards and thanking me for touching it and saying, well, hey, we could have touched, about deacons, and I was like, yeah, I know, I only got an hour. So I was like, well, hey, why don't you come on and we'll talk more about this along with some other issues. So that was a long introduction, but so would that be a fair assessment
Yeah,
of
no, I think it's fair. Yeah.
yeah, one of the things that you mentioned in your comments was that as a former evangelical,
Hmm.
that you said you have sat through sermons on why women shouldn't be ordained.
Correct.
Do you mind sharing a little bit more about that? Because I know there's probably people who are not familiar with that,
Mhm.
and it may be helpful to just share your experience.
Yeah, no. So I grew up in I don't know, I wouldn't say grew up, but the church that I attended when I was younger was a denomination that they will ordain women, but the particular congregation I was at, the pastor did not believe in women's ordination, and the pastor had the authority to make that decision. And so he would choose, so even though they had some seminarians who were women in that congregation and things like that, he would occasionally give sermons explaining, usually based off like Second Timothy.
Of course.
There's the passage about how women shouldn't speak in church, um, explaining about why women's ordination wasn't really valid, or um, how these like women leaders in the church were still like under their husband's authority, and that's really like really where you should be focused. And so when you're in those spaces, a lot of it really does point back to like a lot of complementarianism.
Which,
And
if you wouldn't mind
yes,
sharing what that is for folks.
yeah. So when you're in those spaces, there is a lot of it is always focused on marriage and how that dynamic is set up. And so complementarianism is that the husband leads and that the wife submits to her husband, where most of our mainline denominations tend to push more of an egalitarianism, sorry.
It's okay.
Uh, yes, which sees more like a partnership, and that we have different gifts and we work
Right.
together, and that not necessarily like one gender is called to lead, but perhaps depending on our different strengths, we might lead in one way or another.
Right.
And that we don't fall into these specific gender roles. And so when you're in the complementarianism, it's really shaping you from a like pretty young age about how you're supposed to act as a man and a woman. And so a lot of the marriage books, if you've ever like followed anything like Mark Driscoll says, like a lot of
Mm,
his stuff follows that same like men need to be tough and out, you should be out like
sure.
hunting and protecting your wife and all those things. And very much looking there's a whole ministry called Proverbs 31 based
Oh,
off
right. Right.
um that I, remember learning about this Proverbs 31 woman and feeling like completely inadequate, that there was no way I could ever be so like meek and humble and um
Yeah, what are some of the things that this Proverbs 30, I've heard this phrase before of people say, "Oh, I'm a Proverbs 31 woman." And I don't expect you to know know all of
yeah,
it, but
right off the top,
like
because I've like
what are some of the things that they're saying? This is what a biblical woman, which I would
yeah,
assume that's the phrase.
yes. So it is a lot about being like this, I would say like this mild manner woman who she's good with her money, and she is looks to honor her husband in all things, and she is a good steward of her home, and um I'm trying to think what else there would be. Like there's just like a lot of things where
I'm gonna guess it also probably pertains to how women should dress.
yes, definitely being modest. Yeah, you're not ordaining your like yes, you're not supposed to be very no jewels, you're more conservatively dressed, of course. Um yeah, so just this very like modest, gentle, quiet woman, I would say. She's very faithful. Um Definitely not like a bold, loud
Mhm.
person. Right, and you're always looking to your husband to guide you and teach you where to go. And you're busy taking care of all your children and that's your real priority is this home child life and looking to what your husband needs and really making sure you're taking care of him. And I think when you read all of Proverbs 31, that's not even what that passage is teaching,
Yeah.
but just take out that little part. And that's what they're teaching girls from a young age. And it's all wrapped into purity culture and all those things as well. And so I think that's really where all of this starts out. So you can't have women be ordained because then they would be leading men, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And that ends up becoming a so quote problem because it conflicts with this biblical view that they're claiming.
yes.
And I think this is really kind of important to say that oftentimes these kind of things are presented as, oh, this is the traditional way of doing
Mhm.
things, which may be a tradition of doing things. But oftentimes, what happens is when there's these arguments of, oh, this is the traditional way, this is the orthodoxy,
Yes.
what happens is we lose sight of the humanity, for one thing, and it's also being very selective with history and with culture and all of that, right? I mean, there are plenty of examples of civilizations that this is not how they functioned. That's not to dismiss that this isn't also how civilizations have treated women as well.
Yeah.
But it's a selective type of thing that oftentimes I think maybe another part of this too, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Amy, on this, is oftentimes what I suspect is that a lot of the biblical justification ends up coming from a more view of Bible as inerrant
Correct.
and a literal reading of Scripture, which of course is never actually a literal reading of Scripture. Again, it's selective
Mhm.
because where are these people when welcome the neighbor, welcome the
Mhm.
stranger, or sell all your possessions and give to the poor? Uh, that's Jesus literally said that. And where's the literalism in following that? This is where the Bible ends up being used as a weapon, oftentimes. And I use that term very specifically because it ends up hurting people
Yes.
in that. And so, yeah, I mean, I I really hesitate to think about how many people have been exposed to what you've been exposed to.
I think we don't realize how much it is like within like American culture overall. Like even if you didn't grow up in that church setting, um, I've had friends who have not grown up in church who have these like principles like baked into their
Mm,
like norm or are aware of these things somehow like in their conscience, right? Like it is so prevalent, like we don't even realize that we've like taken them in.
yeah. Yeah, I think
So,
that's a really important point too, Amy. Just and this is really an American problem
yes.
that I think that we see that some of it, especially if folks know history, the prevalence of the Puritan mindset and culture, and anybody who's listened to my show for any length of time knows that I am not a fan of the Puritans. I think they did us no favors in many ways. Uh, and this I think you're absolutely right. Like this is not just a religious issue. This is then seeped into the rest of the culture. We see this now even with how like we see this in Christian nationalism. We see this in some of the other, movements that try to tie religion and politics together. We see this in the voices of people like Doug Wilson, who's we'll call him a pastor, who gets to bend the ear of Pete Hegseth and other administration officials who are setting policy
Yeah.
in this. This kind of reminds me of way. I don't know if you ever read The Rapture Exposed by Barbara Rossing. Great book, highly recommend it. It's probably about 15 years old at this point. And she's talking about, of course, the rapture theology.
Yeah.
And the very first sentence, she says, the rapture is a racket. Uh, and then goes on from there. And what she's doing is she's giving the history of it and talking about it, but then also talking about how there are elected officials and other officials who have bought into this theology, who then have an impact on geopolitics.
Mhm.
So if you have this idea of, oh, there's going to be a rapture and we need to help set it off, then what's your view going to be about peace negotiations in the Middle East? Because you want Jesus to come back. And in order for Jesus to come back, supposedly there needs to be an Armageddon.
Right.
It's not very oriented towards peace.
No.
So I think what you're talking about is really, really important in that. One of the things that you had mentioned in response to my show was, let's talk a little about some of the various callings and rosters that
Okay.
exist, because, and this is like, I know for some people it may be inside baseball, but
Yeah.
I think this is important because
Yeah.
it's not just gender roles
Mhm.
that oftentimes too these can end up being stereotyped as well. But this is about, what are the different callings that
Mhm.
we have? Like your call and my call are different.
Yes.
There's certainly overlap on a lot
Yes.
of things, but there's different callings. So maybe, I don't know if you want to start. Just let's just
Yep.
start talking. What would you say are the different rosters and callings?
So for us in the ELCA, right, we have two main
Yep.
rosters. We have our pastors and deacons. So as a deacon, I would say I'm called to specialized ministries. And we act as a bridge between the church and the world. And so, for instance, I bring like my skills from fundraising into stewardship for the church and our feeding ministries. I bring my specialization with like neurodiversity and stuff for my inclusion ministries, really to help bring like support to the churches. So bring like that outside perspective and help make the church um, able to like be more welcoming and inclusive for people. So, and for stewardship, bringing like new ways of seeing how to fund things than we've traditionally funded things. So,
Right.
yeah.
And this is yeah, the official titles are, there's a minister of word and sacrament and minister of word and service, right? I mean, that's the kind of official
So
uh
deacons traditionally, for those of you who don't know, cannot baptize, and we generally do not. We cannot preside over communion. There are certain situations where a bishop can give permission for deacons to do those
right.
things, but
Well, technically anyone can baptize. So
right.
but in a structured,
In a
orderly
very
fashion.
structured, traditional
Right.
sense,
Right.
those are things only pastors do. And so on Sundays, I will help with leading worship. I preach about once a month, which not all deacons
Right.
preach regularly. So like, for instance, pastors are called to preach the word. Deacons are called to proclaim the word. So there's a little bit of a nuance there
Yep.
because our calls are a little bit different. So we might be doing it in a different way. So
Right. Right. Absolutely. And now here's the other thing. We're both wearing similar
callers.
uniforms,
Yeah.
right? And this is one of the things I think might be confusing for some folks of, oh, well, how are we supposed to know? And I'm sure I can imagine every female colleague that I've ever talked to about this has always said that they have been called in good ways, um, have been called all sorts of names because people get confused and they don't
Yes.
know how to address, a female clergy person. And so maybe you can address that.
Yeah. I mean, I mostly go by Deacon Amy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I've been called pastor, mother, father,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, I get a lot of people try to add on deaconess to me,
Okay.
um, because they think like, well, if there's deacons, that must be like the male name. Um, and in our denomination, deaconesses are actually an additional thing. Once you're as a deacon, you can
Right.
become a deaconess. Um, and they actually get called sisters usually, so it's kind of an
Yes.
act funny. Um, but I haven't run into too many. Mostly, most people are just trying to figure out what a deacon is still.
Right.
I live in an area that has a lot of Catholic people who were Catholic or are Catholics, and most of them are trying to figure out that because unlike in the Catholic Church or an Episcopalian tradition, our deacons do not become pastors.
Right.
You are either a pastor or a deacon. You choose as you're going through candidacy which you are called to.
Right.
So,
Although I will say in the Roman Catholic Church that there are permanent deacons
yes,
as well, who have a very similar call to what you're talking about as well. So we're kind of similar
yes,
in that, except they're all men,
yes.
whereas we don't make that specification in that. So,
When
um,
I'm not in my collar, I do get asked a lot of times if I'm a pastor's wife. So I
oh,
would say
oh,
that is
that's
the big
interesting.
Um, or the assumption is that I found my call because my husband is a pastor.
Oh,
So I'm guessing, like, have you ever been asked if your wife is a pastor?
no.
I've gotten asked multiple times if, where is my husband a pastor?
Wow. I can only imagine the things that you have heard, that I never have to deal with and never hear. This is reminding me of I'm sure you saw the video that the North Carolina Synod
Mhm.
did, right? And it was men, male clergy, reading comments that were made to their female colleagues.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of male clergy, seeing that video really kind of brought it home of like, oh my gosh, like a lot of the comments were inappropriate. They were some of them were just, I don't know, best to say rude for lack of a
Mhm.
better way of describing it, and that's being gentle.
Yeah.
And some were just kind of mind blowing of what in the world. I, like talking about how hair is done and all this.
Mhm. Yep.
I don't think I don't, I could be wrong, but I've never had a conversation with a male colleague about somebody commenting on any of our hair. Now, granted, I shave my head, so, I don't, my hair never goes out of place, but, um, I'm curious, Amy, I would imagine you have probably gotten uh, comments like that,
Mhm.
and whatever you're comfortable with talking about this. I don't want to
Yeah.
put you on the spot, but what uh, like what goes through your mind and your heart in that moment, and what is it that you wish you could share with somebody in that moment when they're saying something like that?
So most of the time, like if it's on appearance, like I just say thank you. Sometimes I know that often, I think especially like female to female communication, it can just be like a form of small talk.
Okay.
Um, it Sometimes it can be hard just because it feels like obviously like you want to be in good relationship with like the people you're serving, right? And
Sure.
so um it can be a bit of a struggle if you feel like you're never getting there with the people, right? If they're just talking all like every week, oh, your hair looks pretty again, right? Um, so I think it's always that balance that you're trying to figure out of how to break that next level. Um, so I've luckily not had any inappropriate comments by like male parishioners. Um, and the few other inappropriate comments I've had, I've been able to find like colleagues to talk about with or defend me well. And it's been handled really well. So I think there has been some good growth there, or I at least have had some good advocates around me. So yeah.
Yeah, again, I'm trying to be a little
Yeah.
sensitive too, because I can imagine, again, I can only imagine, right?
Yeah.
I mean, uh, uh, negative comments usually for me, certainly not in my current call, but have always been more on a theological level, or you're being too political. That
Mhm.
statement has come out, which is really, I've preached
Yeah.
something that was uncomfortable and somebody didn't like being made uncomfortable, those type of things, right? And it's very much uh, these are deeper type
The
of
things you can argue, right? So
things that you can argue and really kind of get into. They're also a revelation of self, of
mhm,
somebody who's in a way saying something about themselves,
mhm,
right? Now, there are also, I would suspect, also when there's these criticisms to female clergy, it's also saying something about themselves
mhm.
in that it's just comes out in these harsh ways that uh, I just struggle to wrap my brain around, wrap my heart around the kind of how often the comments are kind of just very flippant without recognizing the harm and the pain that they cause. Um, and it just causes me to really kind of wonder about like why does that come off so easily without any thought of repercussion, without thought of how this lands on somebody. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just kind of
Yeah.
at a
Well, I mean,
loss.
I mean, I'm definitely not excusing it at all, right? But I
Sure.
think
Oh,
part of
right.
it is that culture is still catching up. I mean, you think of like I love the show The Office, but like if
Yeah.
you think of the amount of stuff in there that you would never say, right?
Yeah, sure.
It was like hilarious when it first came on, right?
Same thing with other shows like Friends or
Right.
right, and some
Um,
of it just has not aged well.
some of it has not aged well, but there's some people still in that mindset and they've not had the chance to grow yet, right? And
Yeah,
so um I at least try to look at like we have the opportunity to help them grow for the next time. Not that I'm not hurt by those things, but
sure.
just they can't do better if they don't know what they're
Yeah,
doing.
yeah.
So,
So
yeah.
before we continue, and then I
Yeah.
want to talk a little bit about something a little bit deeper, get it because we've been
Okay.
pretty light, right? No.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but so before we continue, I want to take a brief moment. We're like halfway through the show, which is, man, it just flies every time. Pause and share a little bit about some things that are close to my heart, places where I say that faith meets action, which is a very diaconal statement. So first is Christ Lutheran Church in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where I'm privileged to serve as the pastor, as well as the executive director of the health ministries here at the church. It's a healing community that if you think about Christ Lutheran as a wheel, center axle is healing, and everything that we do goes to that form of the sense of healing. We offer 3 free health clinics that have welcomed over 100,000 visits since 2018. So if you want to learn more about it, or if you want to help and support, you can go to christharrisburg.org. If you're in the area in South Central Pennsylvania, I always say come and see, schedule a time to visit. I'm happy to do a tour. You can do that right on the website. Second Memorial Blanket Project every year, people from all over the country, and we've even had blankets from internationally as well, create blankets for strangers, and we turn them into a massive art installation that draws attention on the issue of homelessness. And then at the end of the night, we give the blankets away. And so we have done this for 5 years now. It was supposed to be a 1 year project. We've done it for 5 years. This coming year, 2026, we are going to be in New York City. Location is, we're working on the location. Hopefully, it's going to be overlooking the Statue of Liberty. And we will well, figuratively, wrap a blanket around the Statue of Liberty with a sense of welcome. So you can learn more at memorialblanket.org. And lastly, if you're wrestling with the heartbreak of gun violence, you can check out American Roulette. It's a novel that sparks honest conversation about a difficult topic. We don't offer any answers. That's not the point. The point is to change the conversation, to focus on the humanity in the situation of something so horrible. So you can find the book. All the proceeds of the book go to organizations that address gun violence. You can find a free audio version of the book at AmericanRouletteBook.com. And we're working on some other stuff related to that as well. So anyway, with that, we're going to come back to the show. And I'm going to take a sip for a minute. This always happens about halfway through where my throat goes dry. Anyway, um, so I want to, based on your last comment,
Yeah.
and I don't know where this is going. This is one of those things that I
Okay.
wasn't exactly thinking that this is where the conversation was going to
Yeah.
go, but that's the beauty of these conversations. I want to talk about identity
Mhm.
because that really gets at the core, I think, of what's going on. I remember part of my call story was I was Roman Catholic,
Mhm.
and in the discernment process, it was the idea of becoming Lutheran and becoming a pastor, Lutheran pastor. And I remember telling some folks who were close to me because I just didn't want them to find out other ways, and losing some friendships over
Mhm.
that, and or people really struggling with that. And I remember listening to their comments, and the thing that struck me was that all of the things they were saying started with one word, and that one word was I. And what all the criticism after that, I just heard, I am struggling with this. I don't like, this, that, and the other thing. And I realized, oh, this is about them. This is
Mhm.
not about me. And so I'm wondering if a lot of the, we'll call it the criticism or the being opposed to women's ordination. I'm wondering what your thoughts are as far as how much of that comes from a sense of what that person's identity, how that's related to that. And I know there's no nice, easy answer for that, but I'm playing with an idea.
Yeah, I think for some people that's definitely the case. I think especially if you are identifying with a certain faith tradition, right? And that is what you believe. Like we as my I think I heard a lot more my priest, my pastor believes. Because I lost some friendships by going through this process as
Yeah.
well, because women can't be
Mm.
ordained. But um, Yeah, so I think for me, I saw a lot more. I didn't hear I so much as just more of a, um, I saw people placing it on my so and so,
Mm.
and a lot of avoidance of talking about the topic. So, me being in seminary or talking about the process at all, like they would like avoid talking about any part of my life.
Why do you think that is?
I think 'cause they were uncomfortable with it.
Okay.
So if I started talking about, oh, all of a sudden they needed to get off the phone
Uh,
or, you know, time's up at the coffee shop or whatever. So I could sit there for 45 minutes and hear about what's happening with their children or um, whatever. But as soon as it like veered into that corner, so I never got a chance to hear really why their feelings on it. Yeah, so they just instead avoided talking about it. So,
I,
which was
yeah, I suspect,
mission.
I think some of that avoidance might be just because they don't necessarily know why.
Hmm.
They
They just
just
know that
they just
they're not
know.
supposed to.
Yeah, they just know because probably like what you're saying is, well, this is what my pastor had said or my priest or whatever the case may be. Like I would suspect they would have trouble pointing to a specific reason. It's kind of like what I've heard. I don't know if you've ever seen. There's different conversations. The one that's really interesting. It is there's a father and mother and a son and a daughter,
Hmm.
and this is in the political world. I think it's called the Essential Conversation,
Hmm.
something like that. I don't know if people have seen it or not, but they're all adults,
Hmm.
right? So the parents are, I would guess, probably in their 70s. I don't know exactly, and the children are probably about 40-ish.
Okay.
And the parents are, they were big time MAGA supporters and supporters of the current president, and the children are opposed. It's the best way to
Yeah.
describe it, right? And so the children would ask questions about, hey, this was said or this was done or whatever. What do you think about that? And there's no like why.
Hmm.
There's, oh, because, this is great. Okay, well, why?
Hmm.
And there's a struggle to explain why that is.
Yeah.
Um, but, kind of like what you were just talking about is the sense of, well, I know I'm supposed to, but I don't know why.
Hmm.
And that creates a real discomfort for folks um, that
Yeah.
get,
I was brought up, I literally sit there and say, Phoebe in Romans is a
right,
deacon. And they
right.
sit there and go, oh. And they're like, are you sure? Like that's in the Bible? And I go, yes, in Romans, there's
Yep,
Phoebe, deacon. And they go, oh,
right, right. Or, my go-to always is, the story of one of the stories of the resurrection has Mary Magdalene going to the garden,
yes.
meeting Jesus, and Jesus says, go and tell my brothers. What is Jesus doing? He's ordaining her to go and proclaim the good news.
Yeah.
I don't. It doesn't get much more clear. And she's the first one, not
Yes.
like that. She's the first one. He could appear to anybody, but he
Mhm.
appears to Mary Magdalene. And I guess Jesus doesn't know about this whole restriction thing.
He didn't get the memo.
He didn't get the memo. He was on vacation for 3 days, so he's behind on emails or something. Uh, like
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So let's talk a little bit in our message. We you had some things about Christian nationalism. toxic
Yeah.
masculinity, patriarchy in the church. These are big things. And I know a lot of
Yeah.
times for some folks, boy, they hear those words and they immediately turn them out. Um, because they have an idea of what that is,
Hmm.
right? They have a definition, and this is one of the things that I've talked about as well. Oftentimes, is that I think um, when we're having really important conversations, it's important to define terms
Hmm.
because oftentimes what I discover is when we're talking with folks that we don't necessarily agree with, we may be using the same words, the same English words, but we don't mean the same thing. And I
Hmm.
think a great example of that, oftentimes, at least in political things, has to do with the word freedom,
Yeah.
right? I mean, there's a whole range. On one end of the spectrum, freedom is the freedom to impose,
Yeah.
because we're ordained and we're the good guys. And then the other end of the spectrum is freedom means not being imposed upon,
Hmm.
regardless, that type of thing. And then there's a whole range in that. So, how would you define Christian nationalism, toxic masculinity, some of those type of things, and how then? This is a multi
Yeah.
question. Sorry, I know this is important stuff though. Um, and how to then? Well, let's start with that. Let's start with the definitions. I don't want to throw too much at you.
So, when I think of these kinds of definitions, I think about how I would explain them to my children if they asked.
Oh, perfect.
Because I find if you can explain it to like a 9, 10-year-old,
Yeah.
right. Um, so like Christian nationalism, we look at as sort of this political movement that uses like church language to like advance itself, but it's not necessarily like moving the gospel, like it's not doing what like the gospel calls us to do, but it's kind of like using that language for its like own
Yeah.
I would say it's like own agenda, own goals, but they would not necessarily be what we think Jesus has called us to do. Um,
Can I jump in?
yeah.
I think a great example of that. I don't know if you've seen this or not. It's an ad that Department of Homeland Security created, which has one of the phrases from the Beatitudes:
Mhm.
"Blessed are the peacemakers,"
Mhm.
and they've got this, you know, music that goes behind it, and then the images are all of heavily armed ICE agents going and doing raids.
Yes.
Like that's if if that's not Christian nationalism, I don't know what is, because it takes what the intent of what that scripture passage is and it completely flips it on its head for its own empowerment,
Mhm.
which to me is a form of blasphemy. But anyway, sorry, I just
Yeah, no.
it struck me when you were talking about that. By the way, great definition.
Thanks. Yeah, like when you have to break it down to explain to like a 9, 10 year
Yeah,
old, like you have to get down to like these very like bare basics. When I think about like toxic masculinity, right? Like we're looking at like there's nothing wrong with being masculine, right? Which is like embodying these like characteristics that are like you have to think of being like strong and I'm trying to think about like it's kind of hard because you don't want to sit there and like
sure.
say like boys do these things,
Yeah, yeah,
but I think it's when we take those things that we like traditionally assign to boys and men and um use it in a way that like harms others or harms them, right? Like if you don't like play football and love football, like you're not a real boy or man, right? Or use it as a way to make girls feel like less equal or important would also be I would say like a form like that could be a toxic
yeah.
masculine trait. So um
In a way, it's kind of the idea of an antithesis of the idea of imago Dei, the image of God, right? It's
Hmm.
stripping the image of God out of people, whether that's stripping it out of women and others, or and this is one of those things where, for me, when I think about toxic masculinity, it's the idea of being male is not enough,
Hmm.
right? Which is, again, the antithesis of shalom, wholeness and completeness. There has to be more. So there's always the striving for more because it's not enough to just be.
Right.
It's not
I
good
would say
enough.
too that there's one way to be masculine as
Right,
well.
right, right. Absolutely. Yeah. So you see that. So let's talk about that now that we
Hmm.
define those. And I know we don't have a ton of time, but we still got
Yeah.
15 minutes. In relation to the broader conversation that we're talking about here with
Hmm.
ordaining women and
Hmm.
female clergy, and we're not even touching into LGBTQ topics here, or folks who are non-binary, um, which is a whole other uh,
Yes.
is a whole other area that could have its own show. So I'm
Yes.
a little bit of parameters here because otherwise we'd be here forever. Uh, so we're just talking about female clergy right now,
Hmm.
and so I want early on you were talking about this idea, the idea of the cultural impact on this topic,
Hmm.
and thinking about Christian nationalism, toxic masculinity, which are really kind of forms of patriarchy.
Yeah.
Um, and I want to get to, what do we do? What do we
Hmm.
do to help move people along in a healthy direction? What do we do to help people um, see the things within them, to see, like, what we were talking about before, with the idea of, I know it's wrong, but I don't have a reason why. And
Hmm.
to start to question that, to say, okay, if I don't have a reason why, well, then is it wrong? Like, I think part of the challenge that we face oftentimes in our society is, if we're missing helping people go one step and then another step and then another step. We want them to get all the way there with
Hmm.
one leap. So that was a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So what thoughts on how do we move forward in a healthy way?
Um, so I think some of it is really working on immersing ourselves in more I don't know if it's like media that talks about this so that it becomes more of our normal language. There's a lot of women out there doing really good work exploring this. And so for instance, I think like Beth Allison Barr just had a book out last year about, it's called Becoming the Pastor's Wife, and it looks all at women's ordination and like kind of why it went away. And she talks a lot about like we lift up all these throughout the century, these women who were like Hildegard, right, who was lifted up as like an abbess, and Deborah, who was the leader of the judges, as these exceptional
Hmm.
women, but actually by saying that they're exceptional, it implies that the norm was that men were preaching and that they were just like, oh, we let this one woman
Mm,
be a preacher, rather than there were lots of women preachers and that these happen to be, and lots of women judges, and these just happen to be the best ones, right?
mm.
And so it's like a shift in our language,
Yeah,
even how we perceive those things, right?
yeah,
Um, and so, which then, like, I think that opens it up to like when you're talking about how we're not even touching on like our LGBTQIA neighbors, like, how do we, if we keep lifting up just these exceptions rather than saying, like, there are always been people doing this,
right.
they're not in these, we just know, we only know of some of their names and they weren't exceptions. They're just the names we know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I really like that because that is the idea of what is the norm that we're measuring. What's the measuring stick that we're using, right? Is the measuring stick somebody who always looks like me, which
Mhm.
God help us if that's the case. Or is the measuring stick saying, okay, here's what the calling is, and here's what is required of the person filling that role. Now that opens things up, and it moves away from, oh, do you have certain body parts, in which case, okay, then obviously you must be okay for this position, which
Right.
just saying that, you can hear the ridiculousness of it. Like, what? Um, this is nothing to do with nature. This has nothing to do with any of that. This has to do with, I don't remember Jesus saying, go, what Matthew 28, go and baptize, but only if you're male and you've gone to seminary and this, that, and the other thing. None of that
Only
is.
if you've written enough essays,
Yeah,
right?
right. Yeah, right. And you paid enough money to go to a seminary and all of that. Yeah. So those are. Yeah, so I want to keep talking a little bit about this idea of changing the norm. And one of the things that I think is a struggle is, um, I think there's a lot of folks who have a tendency to think of the people who are or most resistant
Mhm.
first, and I think that's a mistake.
Mhm.
Um, right? It's one thing, we're supposed to treat people regardless of what they're believing and how they treat us with, some respect, or at least see their humanity, and we're supposed to love people. But I don't think necessarily that's the starting point of the norm. It's finding the folks who are already close to
Yeah,
that, and and working with those folks, the ones that are you're much closer to, as
right.
opposed to trying to get somebody who's, like, if we're like this far apart, we're trying to. It's really hard to go where that person is
Correct.
and see any type of progress. But if there's a whole bunch of other people
Over
that have
here.
now kind of shifted, generally what happens is people end up kind of starting to shift.
Hmm.
We see that in the general culture. Like, think about, it wasn't that long ago that same-sex marriage by the population was viewed very negatively,
Correct.
and then enough people just kind of shifted on that, and
Hmm.
now the general population is very supportive.
Correct.
And so I'm just wondering, what do you think it's going to take? And I know this is a centuries old challenge,
Yeah.
and we're dealing with systems that are not designed to change. So I don't expect you to have the
Sure.
answer, Amy. No pressure on that.
No, but I think it's just not just like I think I looked it up that you had like people, it's not just like women saying like, hey,
Yeah.
women can preach, but having our allies lift up like this, like women are pastors and deacons and can be ordained is just as important. I know um, one of the big things that brought me over to the ELCA when we were looking for a new church was listening to a children's sermon on Deborah, and the pastor got up and said, women can be leaders too. Like
Well, yeah.
just talking about like the equality of women leadership in the church. And I think like I started crying because I'd never
Mm,
heard a male pastor say women can be leaders in the church too.
wow.
Because I'd previously been at a church where I was told women couldn't be.
Right.
Um, and so I think having like, and every time I've heard like a male pastor preach on that validity, even though like clearly like we're in a like we had a female presiding bishop, we have so many female
Right.
bishops, like, we have so many female clergy, like we're very cool with it. Like every time we are telling somebody in the pews that needed to hear that it's like legit and real um and like how much of an impact it has, right?
Yeah.
So because like we're all carrying stuff from who knows
Yeah.
where, and might have
Right.
had a friend at school who told them no, or some family member or whatever. So
Yeah, I think um, that's really powerful. Thanks for
I
sharing that,
mean,
Amy.
who would have guessed a Spark Story Bible was going to be the big thing, right?
Oh, the power of children's sermons, that where
Yes.
oftentimes you're not really talking to the children at all.
Nope.
You're talking to everybody else in the pews. So yeah. Well, Amy, we're coming to the end of our time. It went by like just like that.
Yeah.
Last thoughts that you have for anything that you want to say about the topic.
Yeah. Just keep reading and listening to women and those who support them, and hearing their stories. So there's a lot of information out there if you're willing to look. And like I said, you'll see that once you start reading, you'll see how much of this stuff is really throughout our entire culture, um, not just in the church. And like it's like centuries, decades
Yeah.
old, like bringing up, and I'm sure you've talked about it like hundreds times, but like all of this political stuff is decades in the making. It's not just a brand new,
There's
you
nothing
know,
new under the sun.
there's nothing new under the sun, and it's been 50 years, been planned out.
Right.
So
And that 50
also,
years is based off of centuries old theology and ideology that I call the theology of empire.
and
Um,
intersectionality, it's all related to.
right,
So some of this is we're oppressing women so that we can also oppress somebody else
right.
on that. So just, yeah, if you are listening, just, yeah, keep reading, keep listening. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
and I think again, I just want to emphasize the importance of what you're talking about. This isn't just an inside baseball, inside the church issue. This has ramifications on so many other things. I mean, look, we still have trouble voting for a female president, or you can check the box on several other classifications of folks that would have a difficult time. But at the same time, the good news about that is that societies do change, right? At one time, it was thought impossible to vote for a Catholic president, and we've had two.
yep.
And so things do change. I don't know. I got like 2 minutes, but somebody had asked me today about, what am I supposed to do with, there's all these scriptures about hope, and I'm struggling with this because there's all these messages, and yet it's not for the people who are hearing it. What about them? And I ended up saying, well, that's because we look at scripture through an American individualistic lens. And so if it doesn't affect me, what good is it? As opposed to seeing the larger connection of who we're connected to across time and space. And so this is good news. Maybe it's not going to impact my own personal life,
Mhm.
but maybe it's 7 generations from now. Maybe it's whatever the case may be, that we're all part of something much larger in that. And so I think of this topic in relation to that I certainly have this hope that, I would love it to be today where everyone is like, okay, great, wonderful.
Yeah.
We're all on board.
We're just going to vote for the people who are best for the job, right?
Right.
Yes.
And I know realistically that's just not the case. And we can move forward. We're always right. The idea is
Right.
God is moving us, pulling us along, oftentimes kicking and screaming to a
Yes.
better, to something much better. So,
Yes.
anyway, with that, Amy, thank you so much
Yeah. Thank
for
you for having me.
taking the time to be on, to being part of the show, to talking about this topic. And I hope everyone has a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.